Good morning, good morning, good morning. Merry not so stupid o'clock, everyone. Welcome to another bleh episode of Spilling Tea. I am your host, Tiffany Daniels, and the reason why I'm not wearing makeup in spite of it being my weekend is because I don't wanna. We're going back to that horrible world of the JRC, and here's my co-host, Eagle Kitty. But before we get started, a few of the usual disclaimers. Tell us them, Kitty. What are the disclaimers? Because disclaimers are meow. Is that what they are? Are they meow? Alright, so first off, folks, you are going to see the link to this investigation done in 1995 to the death of Linda Cornelison right there in the description box, alongside the other pertinent links to the Stop the Shocks campaign, including Autistic Hoya's massive archive on the subject, as well as the templates. Folks, photobombed. Sign your name, click on your senator. It takes less than 2 minutes. We are trying to end adversive therapies, improper restraint, and seclusion inside public schools. Folks, it kills people every single year. It makes Mr. Kitten very unhappy. He likes the kids, don't you, Mr. Mew? Alright, folks, and also we have present the ever-present change.org shut the Judge Rotenberg Center down petition, which, let's face it, it's self-explanatory, alright? Now, when we talk about the JRC, you're going to hear vivid descriptions of and catch clips of surveillance footage of people with disabilities being tortured and abused. If you have young children present, folks, please use your headphones. Alright. Mr. Kitten cannot travel through the computer to wrap himself around their ears. He would if he could. Alright. Also, as you've noticed, I'm not entirely quite awake yet. And as I started exercise routine now, which mainly focuses on my back for kind of my midweek sort of thing, my brain is kind of mush right now. So if I stumble over any words, babble, stare off into space, or start cursing, my apologies in advance, alright? Okay, so we are going to where we left off yesterday. And folks, if you want to know what we are talking about, by the way, the first video I did on this subject, after I learned in April that they were still using the shocks as they did not enforce the ban due to the fact that the corona was going on. And then in July, of course, the horror of when they overturned the FDA ban. Please click on that video to learn what's going on. Please watch it towards the end, okay? Alright, so going back to where we were. The health risks to BRI residents as a result of the lack of refrigeration was described by consultant DeSant, Appendix E. So we're going back to the fact that they don't even refrigerate the food that they feed these kids. And they wonder why students are dying. When food is allowed to sit out, two critical components of microorganism growth come together: time and temperature. Foods being maintained at room temperature do not meet regulations. When those foods sit at room temperature for more than 45 minutes to an hour, optimal conditions for food microorganism growth occur. There exists a wide variety of foodborne pathogens. They cause a variety of highly unpleasant side effects, and some can lead to death, especially in a person whose health is already compromised in some way. It is critical that the food safety regulations be followed at all times. It is my professional opinion that a review of the way the BRI uses food as a behavior modifier be undertaken to ensure the nutritional well-being of BRI's clients. One has to wonder, was it ever done? And if so, was it ever enforced? Because I tend to doubt it. Okay, here we go. Additional findings and conclusions with respect to the behavior program overall. Due to the complexity of Vi's program, Dr. Angela Duarte, a behavior consultant, was retained to assist in addressing the issues. In performing this consultation and in reviewing Vi's overall treatment program, she made a number of findings and conclusions with respect to the appropriateness and the effectiveness of BRI's interventions. Some of these findings and conclusions may constitute a violation of the Department of Regulations and are contrary to the basic professional practice. God, I would hope so. As these, excuse me, allergies. As these practices continue and are relevant to other students, they warrant review by and are hereby referred to the Regional Director pursuant 115 CMR. So you're referring them to the department that the courts have literally tied their hands and not allowed them to do anything. Okay, that's going to help. The following is a synopsis of Dr. Duarte's major findings. Her full report is attached as Appendix D for review. Based on a review of Vi's history at BRI, Dr. Duarte concluded that punishment procedures were introduced a few weeks after Vi's admission to BRI, targeting a wide range of behaviors that might have responded well to positive approaches. Those had been attempted for a reasonable period of time. Let's remember, they try it like maybe all of 2 days, if they even try it at all, before they're sending them to the courts to get punished for, existing. The charts examined did not show the formal positive approaches being attempted to address 5 behavior problems prior to the introduction of punishment. I don't care how positive they are. Behavior modification does not work by and large, other than teaching us how to mask. Now, why does this not work in the long term? Well, I can tell you, there is such a thing called burnout. What is burnout? Burnout tends to happen when you constantly mask all the time. And what is masking? Masking is pretending to, for lack of a better term, be normal, pretend to be someone else entirely, to be like everybody else, so to speak, in spite of what's going on around you, whether there are sensory issues, emotional triggers, all of it we are taught to mask and just will them away, will them away, will them away. Where there is a consequence to that. When you constantly mask and pretend to be someone else and pretend to not be affected for long periods of time, eventually you become completely overwhelmed. Masking is something that is incredibly exhausting, folks. It is exhausting to pretend to be someone other than who you are all the time, regardless of what's going on around you, what sensory issues are going on, what emotional issues are going on. We are taught to never say no. We are taught to pretend to be like everyone else, speak like everyone else, act like everyone else, every day, every minute of the day. It is exhausting, and there is a mental health consequence to doing that. Eventually, you get overexhausted and you burn out. Now, what happens during burnout? When you burn out, it's very similar to how you see neurotypicals act during depression. We stop talking. Some of us regress, very much so. Our autistic traits that we've been hiding all this time come out to haunt us. And what do I mean by that? Last time I had a major burnout, I literally regressed to the age of 3. Literally regressed to the age of 3. I literally had to re-potty train myself, reteach myself how to dress, feed myself, all of it, as I was slowly coming out of the burnout. That's what burnout does. So, yeah, there's that. That's why when anyone sits there and tell you that ABA is the only way, this is why it doesn't make any sense. Because It is using behavior modifications and basically teaching us how to act every day of our lives, but it doesn't change how our brains work, okay? It doesn't affect what happens whenever we are triggered. You can't treat something that is neurological coming from your brain with behavior modification because, again, boys and girls, what is it? It's not willful behaviors. All we can do is repress. Repress those behaviors. Repress ourselves by pretending to be someone else. And again, there are terrible consequences to doing that. Moving on. For example, by the end of October 1984, less than 3 weeks after Vi arrived, BRI had already introduced water spray adversive for tearing paper and throwing or spilling objects off the table. And by November the 22nd, 1984, taste adversives and ammonia were added. This despite the fact that Vi's inappropriate behaviors had been showing a decelerating trend. By January 1985, after 3 months at BRI increased the number of taste adversives and added spank, muscle squeezes, finger pinches, and hand squeezes, wrist squeezes, and brief cold showers, which is insane. Insane! Subsequent to the addition of adversives in 1984, Vi's inappropriate behaviors increased. Gee, ya think? Here's another thing. When we are stressed out, whether it just be from life in general, like in my case, or whether it's because you're being punished for existing, those autistic quote unquote behaviors, they're going to come out. Anyone with behavioral issues, they're going to come out. That's what I mean. There's consequences for this sort of thing. This is why behavior modification doesn't work for the developmentally disabled. I don't understand why this is a hard concept to understand. Suggesting that I return to the previous intervention and or reusing the positive procedures. Instead, as noted, BRI increased the variety and severity of adversives in January 1985, which after a brief decrease was followed by a drastic increase in inappropriate behaviors. This goes back to the whole concept of the abusive child. We're going to beat it out of them. Yeah, because that's going to work. That usually produces one of two responses, folks. This produces one of two responses, and this is with everybody. They are either A, going to be so traumatized and catatonic by the end of it that that person will be unrecognizable and will need years of therapy to be able to heal. Or two, that person is going to be so enraged by the abuses that they are receiving that they are going to act out. This is why corporal punishment doesn't necessarily work, as we noted, in the 90s. God. Neither BRI's policy nor its practice in changing behaviors to be consequented by Level 3 and other adversives follow DMR's regulations, which permit the use of such adversives only for seriously dangerous behaviors, and not at all anymore if you've seen their recent DMH's regulations. But JRC doesn't have to obey those because they got a consent decree in 1986. God, in spite of the fact that, their methods have killed people. Like Vi here. BRI's own policy allows Level 3 consequences for merely embarrassing behaviors. Let me read that again. For merely embarrassing behaviors. This is what I mean when I say that these people, they want us to mask all the time. To make them and the regular average person more comfortable around you. As noted by Dr. Duarte, Punishment procedures are typically used to address severe behavior problems, which is bullshit. The vast majority of Vive's behaviors targeted for treatment with punishment did not appear to be severe enough to warrant such intrusive form of treatment. BRI allowed adversives in Vive's case for such things as drooling, spitting, nagging, stopping work, refusing, silly laughing. She was deprived of food for merely having the wrong answer on the computer. Imagine that. Imagine being deprived from being able to eat because you didn't answer a question correctly. Documentary evidence indicates that punishment procedures might have actually produced an increase in Vi's inappropriate behavior. See generally pp. 13 through 20 by one example from Dr. Duarte's report. Figure 5 shows that the total number of inappropriate behaviors were temporarily reduced in January through April 1985. However, by May 1985, the number of inappropriate behaviors began increasing again to reach a level of 500% worse than baseline. By point made, 3077 in May 1985, and 5,586 in June 1985. 10,055 in July 1985, and 31,627 in August 1985. So obviously, the adversives are not working, and instead of having logic, coherent sense, and realizing their methods aren't working, and maybe go back to the drawing board and come up with something else, their thought was, well, let's increase it. And every time they increased it, look, the numbers speak for themselves. Those behaviors increased. Yeah. Apparently, in September of 1985, BRI was prohibited from using physical punishments such as finger pinches, muscle squeezes, spank, hard squeezes, and wrist squeezes. Figure 5 also shows that as these forms of physical punishment were dropped from treatment, the frequency of Vi's inappropriate behaviors decreased substantially. Who's surprised? Not me. These effects suggest that the punishment procedures might have been producing the increase in frequency of inappropriate behaviors. Might, really. This would be consistent with the literature in applied behavior analysis. Oh, for fuck's sake. Can we not use ABA as the measure here? Because, their success, not so much. You see, I am a part of a larger autistic community online, and I can tell you how much they don't work and how much ABA has brought trauma on these kids. And not to mention, not just trauma, but burnouts and just severe consequences on how they see themselves. Many have become suicidal in the past, folks. Just saying. Both of the above phenomena, the lack of seriously dangerous behaviors and the minimal and even aggravating effect of adversive consequences, was supported anecdotally from staff testimony as well. By the way, folks, remember the fact that the people, ABA International, backs these evil bastards. She would attempt to bite someone when they put her on the board. When Vi would become aggressive, it was always when staff attempted to apply an adversive, also known trying to defend yourself. I never remember aggression by Vi without an adversive. Vi was very low level, not intense, just in response to people coming at her. She would bite herself lightly or pick her fingers, but all day the students have to do is do it once and it will be consequented. The parents would come in and have really no idea what's going on. He's PC2's the biggest manipulator I've met. W11. Vi's behaviors were not that bad. She was one of the best students. She was happy. She liked to rock. Out of 12 kids, she was in the top 3. She was happy. She'd rock to music and dance. Her most major behaviors were pinching her inner thigh, picking her gums, or biting herself, but not severely. Minor. She typically click her tongue or have hand play. I didn't see her as violent in general. The only behaviors I remember she had was that she would clutch another student. She would try to steal someone's food. Most of her behaviors were twitty little ones. She would grab people in a situation that was scary to her. Sometimes she would bite herself, but not enough to leave a mark, not to break the skin. I took her to Rocky Point on a ride. She grabbed me, not to hurt me. She was scared. She'd tap everything and pinch her inner thigh. She wasn't BRI material. She had hand play manipulation. She'd bite her hand, not hard. PC2 doesn't believe you can make allowances. You consequate. Vi would hoard things in her pockets or underwear. She would have to be checked before getting on the bus. If you took her behind screen to check her, she knew. She knew she'd get into trouble for putting something in her underwear. If it was time to check her, she'd grab you. She would steal food, put things in her mouth. Well, gee, I wonder why. Why would she steal food? They're just starving her. That should tell you a lot. If she was stealing food, think about it. Why was she stealing it? Why would you steal it in this situation? It was a fight to give Vi ammonia. She'd be in a panic and try to get away from you. It used to break my heart. She'd panic and grab me. She would mouth things, mouth to object, not swallow it. She'd headbang, not like other students, just shake her head. When she was scared, she would grab your shirt. She was very happy, aware of everyone around. If someone was going to get ammonia, she would get nervous and grab the person next to her. She was pleasant, friendly, not aggressive or violent, only if she saw ammonia. She would grab out of reaction in response to the adverse of ammonia, which is completely logical. If she received an adversive, she was aggressive. She would grab you to stop you. The only time I saw her aggressive was when she got an adversive. We had to put her on the board to give her ammonia. There were cuffs on the board. 4, 2 for the feet and 2 for the hands. She'd be laying on the board. You would squat at the head, brace the head between your knees, put goggles on her, and from the top of the head, squirt into each nostril. She would bang the front of her computer. She wasn't a runaway. The group she was in was slow. Vi was very mobile. She was paces ahead. She would walk fast. She would steal food and stick pennies in her pockets. Gee, I wonder why. She'd put things in her mouth. Gee, I wonder why. All right, we're going to stop there. But this was a very loaded little thing that we've gone over this morning. So what is the stats saying here? That the only time she was ever aggressive, in spite of what the JRC, then the BRI were saying, was when someone was getting ready to hurt her with an adversive. That the only thing she would do came from the consequence of the fact that they were starving her on her food program. That when she was not being treated with adversives, that those quote-unquote behaviors would decrease significantly. If that doesn't tell you everything they do at the JRC makes things worse rather than better, I don't know what does. We've gone over the data and the actual numbers that proves that fact. So, on that note, we're going to go ahead and close out this morning. We don't get very many views on this channel, especially on this subject. The few that we do get do tend to get removed from time to time. So folks, please don't forget to hit that like button. Hit subscribe. Don't forget to hit the comments. I do appreciate your time this morning. And as always, we here at Smelling Tea hope you have a good one. Now, don't worry, folks. Here after this, we are going to be doing the JD versus AH video. We've got a lot of stuff to cover. So I will definitely be coming back a little bit later with some of the stuff on that. Right now, I just really want to relax and detox from the last 2.5 weeks. All right. I hope you all have a good one. Bye-bye.